Welcome to Daily Drive for Friday, May 1st, 2026. I'm Jake Neer in Detroit, in for Kellen Walker. Today on the show, Ford brings back employee pricing for everyone, Detroit automakers await more than $2 billion in tariff refunds, and sales slip for Hyundai, Kia, and Mazda as the post-tariff hangover sets in. Plus, a preview of Automotive News' 2026 Top 100 Dealers ranked by used car sales.
There is no new car alternative to anything below 30 grand to speak of, right? So, that is become the affordability vehicle that consumers are looking for.
Let's run through all the news you need to know to keep up in the auto industry. Ford is bringing back employee pricing for everyone through July 6th, and this time they're tying it to America's 250th birthday. The automaker's calling it American Value for American Values. Now remember, Ford pulled the same move last year when tariff uncertainty had shoppers sitting on their hands. The automaker's Andrew Frick tells us in Automotive News that this is about celebrating the semi-quincentennial, but it's also about growing their customer base in a market that's looking pretty flat. The deal includes the F-150, even though inventory is tight from aluminum supply issues. What's not included? Raptor models and high-performance variants. Meanwhile, Ford, GM, and Stellantis are about to get a pretty nice check from the U.S. government, more than $2 billion in tariff refunds. This comes after the Supreme Court ruled in February that many of President Trump's tariffs were unconstitutional. Ford's already counting on $1.3 billion. GM and Stellantis are each expecting around $500 million. The automakers say this money couldn't come at a better time. It'll help cushion the blow from surging commodity costs tied to the war in Iran. But don't think tariffs are going away. GM still expects to pay up to $3.5 billion in tariffs this year. And remember last year's buying frenzy? Shoppers rushing to beat the tariffs? Well, the hangover is definitely here. Hyundai and Kia both saw sales slip for the second straight month in April. Mazda's down for the 9th month running, off 17%. But here's the twist. Despite those monthly drops, the Korean automakers say they're actually gaining market share this year. The secret weapon? Hybrids. They now make up a third of Hyundai's sales. The industry's projected annual sales pace fell to around 16 million vehicles, down from 17.2 million last April, when everyone was essentially panic buying before those tariffs kicked in. And those are today's headlines. You can find more details on all of those stories at autonews.com. Nissan has told U.S. suppliers it's canceling plans to build electric vehicles in Mississippi, pivoting instead to gas-powered truck-based vehicles. The move ends a $500 million EV investment announced in 2021. The Canton, Mississippi plant will now build a revived Xterra SUV starting in late 2028, followed by the redesigned Frontier and a 3-row midsize SUV. Joining me to talk about all of it is Urvaksh Karkaria, who got the scoop for us at Automotive News. Urvaksh, welcome back to Daily Drive.
Hi, Jake. Glad to be back.
So, as we know, many automakers are pulling back their EV plans. That's no surprise. But what's Nissan's specific calculus here?
Yeah, so Nissan, like its peers, basically did the math and realized the math does not math. They had these ambitions of building 200,000 EVs by 2028 in the U.S. These plans were drawn up in the heyday of EV excitement when the U.S. government was fully backing the technology with incentives and investment in charging infrastructure. All that has collapsed and has taken, demand with it. Nissan figured that this investment, if they had made it, would never recoup itself, or it would take more than a decade, I guess. So they've just cut their losses and canceled the plan. Now, this was sort of a gradual thing. We've been reporting for the past year that these EVs, they had initially planned to build 2 crossovers and 2 sedans, one each for the Nissan and Infiniti brands. So the sedans got axed first, and then following a few delays, and then the crossovers were also delayed. And then in September, Automotive News essentially confirmed that this project was dead. And, this week, they basically told suppliers that officially have canceled the plans.
I guess the silver lining kind of makes itself here in some ways, right? That, they have to cancel this big investment, but it also opens up this opportunity in Canton. They don't have to, build out more manufacturing capacity locally to pull off this really sort of cornerstone of their turnaround plan, which is these body on frame platforms.
Yeah.
Talk about the significance of that for Nissan and its dealers.
Yeah. So, I think last year, maybe a little before that, they sort of came up with this new strategy of body on frame. And I guess, they want to build these vehicles in the U.S. for a number of reasons. These are sort of made for U.S. kind of product, truck-like, rugged vehicles. And they obviously conveniently had a production plant that's relatively underutilized. It only builds the Frontier and sedan, so they were able to slot it into that. But this is an interesting product or range of products if Nissan can actually execute it on time and in the right way. So they've developed this new body-on-frame platform. It will, as you said, support 5 vehicles. The most interesting one, if not the highest volume, is the Xterra. So they're bringing back the Xterra, as iconic Nissan product, SUV. They're going to make it affordable like the old version, but it's going to be more rugged. I've seen the product in Japan, or rather renderings of the product in Japan. And it's going to create a lot of buzz. It's going to drive excitement into the brand, which is really one of the big things Nissan needs. They've got the product. The problem is nobody considers them, or very few people consider them. That's changing now, so we shall see. And then this platform is also, going to have a lot of component sharing. According to suppliers I spoke with, about 70% of the components are going to be common across the 5 vehicles. Everything, I believe, forward of the B-pillar will be similar. What that means is it reduces complexity in manufacturing, can get these products to market, to production faster, and also lower the cost, which is important for, a product like Xterra. So on paper, this is a good plan. Again, the devil is in the details. Can Nissan launch these products on time? That's something that they've been challenged with for years. So TBD.
Nissan, as always, keeping our friend and colleague Urvaksh Karkaria busy over there in Atlanta and overseas on his reporting trips. You can find all of Urvaksh's reporting on this and other things over at autonews.com. Urvaksh, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for the time, Jake.
Coming up, a preview of Automotive News' 2026 Top 100 Dealers ranked by used car sales. That's next on Daily Drive.
The auto industry talks a lot about the software-defined vehicle, but the SDV space race is already creating clear winners and losers.
It's kind of a Frankenstein's monster of IP.
On this week's episode of the Automotive News Shift podcast, I'm joined by Alex Euler, Consulting Director at SBD Automotive. We break down who's leading in the SDV race, why Tesla and other EV-only brands have an edge, and whether newer EV automakers can keep their lead as legacy brands try to catch up. Plus, we'll hear about the latest Chinese tech on display at the Beijing Auto Show this past week. I'm Molly Boygon. Join me on Shift, available this Sunday wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome back to Daily Drive. I'm Jake Neer. Automotive News is set to release our 2026 Top 100 Dealers ranked by used car sales. This year's data shows many dealers are selling more used vehicles than new ones, and they've had to adapt their strategies to meet that shift. Automotive News' Rudy Shork has this preview, and we also hear from our own Mark Holmer and some of the subjects that he interviewed for this piece.
This year's data shows that many dealers are selling more used vehicles than new ones. We dive into why dealers are increasingly betting on used cars, how they've had to adapt to meet that focus, and how it's impacting their sales. We also look at strategies used vehicle dealers are using to find success and profitability, whether it be diversifying sources amid low supply, building their reputation as a used car dealer or matching their inventory to their demographic. This year, many dealers push beyond the traditional one-to-one, used-to-new sales mix. Consumers are gravitating towards less expensive vehicles as the average price of a new car tops $50,000. Dealers are leaning on used vehicles during this affordability crisis. 31 of the Automotive News' top 100 used dealerships surpassed the one-to-one average in 2025, up from 27 dealerships in 2024. Here's what Patrick Janes, Assistant Vice President of vAuto Inventory Management Solutions at Cox Automotive and a former used car dealership manager, thinks is pushing dealers and buyers to the used vehicle market.
The affordability factor is, we're not dealing with, low interest rates like we had before, and now we're dealing with fuel prices and some pain around the inflationary impacts of that. So I think consumers certainly are looking for the used car alternative. And as a result, I talked to a number of dealers recently that said, I remember back in the day, everybody wanted to have under $15,000 used cars, because those things would really sell well. They provided a low payment to, somebody that could just get into a vehicle. And now they're like, I can't keep under $30,000 used cars on my lot. I'm like, wow. But literally, because there is no new car alternative to anything below 30 grand to speak of, right? So that is become the affordability vehicle that consumers are looking for. And I guess when you get into late model used cars, some of the premium luxury brands, and then there's maybe more competition against the new car alternative. But what is there to compete against if someone's looking for that, under $30,000 payment? And even though the rate might be a little bit higher on a used car versus a new car, there's no, alternative to compare to. Should I get into, a really decontented cheap new, or should I get into a used car? That one I just described, I don't think exists. In any kind of volume out there. With all the OEMs kind of, going away from cars, more into SUVs and trucks and more higher price point new vehicles.
How long has that trend been going now, and how long do you think it will continue?
Well, I keep coming back to the, I hate to, benchmark everything off of the pandemic, but the pandemic created a shortage of new cars, which created a higher margin opportunity for dealers. So they were making, before, we're selling them well below invoice, minus rebate, minus, whatever. And kind of, I remember a time when, you had that late model used car, that CPO car, if you will, right? Boy, you better be careful, because if that thing, where you were in it got too high, it would literally compete with new cars, maybe even a decontented new car of the same model. If you had a CPO car that had some equipment, they might be priced at parity. And so you had to be really careful if a OEM put big incentives on a vehicle, it could step on your late model CPO business. And that was a real thing. I don't think we've seen that kind of situation for a while. Now used cars have been kind of appreciating, the prices have come up certainly since the pandemic. But the fact that the dealers are also making a nice margin on those new cars, I don't think dealers feel that pressure as much like they did before. That, boy, if my OEM throws a $8,000 rebate on this vehicle, it could actually cut into my late model used business. So there's a little of that going on. I also believe that I've heard from 8 to as high as 10 million units out of the market back during the pandemic would be today's used cars, right? Those 3-4 year used cars that would be really perfect in the wheelhouse. Those cars, aren't necessarily there. We don't have the ability, dealers don't want to go to the auction and buy those kind of late model new car kind of trade-offs that they had before. So I think that there isn't as much conflict from an affordability standpoint going on with the new cars anymore. The fact that those OEMs went very upscale in MSRP and in content and in, kind of the high end of their trim levels, we know there was a lot of that happening because those were more profitable vehicles. I think that's left a little bit of a void for used cars to step in there, even though used cars aren't going for nothing. I mean, they're holding their values quite well. They're still able to come in there and offer just a better value for buyers that are out there. So the affordability thing is still a big deal.
And these are just some of the reasons behind the growth of the used vehicle market. In our top 100 used vehicle package, we dive into the changing landscape and how dealers are adapting. The data also reveals that smaller dealers are excelling in the used vehicle market. During the COVID-19 pandemic, many dealers found that used vehicles often brought more money per sale than new vehicles. That made used vehicles a reliable revenue source for many dealerships. For more insight into these trends, look to autonews.com. For this year's top 100 used dealership package, Automotive News asked many dealers what strategies they're using to find success. Many dealers are expanding their used vehicle sourcing, looking for cars on Facebook Marketplace, for example. Others are focusing on their reputations, or making sure their inventory meets the needs of their demographic. Jeff Neeson, CEO of Van Horn Auto Group of Sheboygan, Wisconsin, talks about some of the strategies his dealers use to maximize used vehicle sales.
Every year there's a dip come December, January in the used car market. So when you're holding that used car inventory, if it's 60 days old, you're losing money on it, right? You just got to blow it out of there. But because the market's falling, you just replace it and you kind of burn through it. And that's the way of the world, at least in the Midwest in the cold months. That didn't happen this year. There wasn't a dip in January. The MMR was staying 100% or north of 100. However, retail on our end wasn't really following it. So guys were paying what we would call obscene amounts of money at the auction for late model used. So 2024, 2025, we'd have a number on every single car going through, and these guys are paying $4, $5, $6 more than our number. We don't have our numbers priced so we can buy it and bring it home and make $5,000 on the car. That's not reality, right? We have them priced knowing where we're going to transact at as a percentage of the market. And they were just so obscene. I finally just pulled and I said, look, guys, you got to back off. You can't continue to pay for this stuff because we're going to get killed. If we sell them within 30 days where we think we're going to sell them, we're going to lose money. And if you don't, and it's 60 days later and say the market starts to drop, it's going to be really ugly. So what did we do? We didn't just say, okay, we're going to buy less cars. It forced us to start concentrating a lot more on, frankly, the areas we should have been concentrating on more already anyway, which is buying out of our service lanes, buying from Facebook Marketplace, Kelley Blue Book Instant Cash Offer. We've used Kelley Blue Book Instant Cash Offer in our Sheboygan area already with pretty good success. But our stores are kind of spread out throughout southeastern Wisconsin. They're not all within like a 20 mile radius. The farthest store is about 2 hours north, and then another one about 2 hours southwest. So we really started concentrating on inventory acquisition through other lanes, not auction lanes, right? Don't get me wrong. We're still buying cars through the auction. We bought 485 cars in March through the auctions, but we probably normally would have bought 650, somewhere around there.
To be clear, you're anticipating lower used vehicle sales for 26.
Yeah, that was the adjustment. Originally going into 26, we said, okay, used car supply is going to increase again year over year. In turn, prices should come down, which means we'll be able to continue buying, and then we're going to sell more. And what we saw happen early in the quarter was the prices weren't coming down. They were actually going up, and retail wasn't going with it. So we intentionally backed off. Going into March, we had forecasted having 2,000 used cars in inventory. We went in with 1,500. So that's a material difference, right? So we had forecasted 2,000 in inventory and selling 1,250 used. We only had 1,500, and in turn, we sold 1,000 used. So our actual turn rate on the inventory we have was better than what we had forecasted with the higher rate. If you follow what's going on right now, last week was the first week this year that the MMR has actually gone down. So MMR went down 0.5% last week, and retail did not follow. So what's going on there? We know one thing to be true for sure. When you've got a market for a particular vehicle, the stuff that's priced the lowest clears the fastest, clears the market, right? So when that happens, the lower price stuff is leaving, which means the higher price stuff is left. So then you could see how retail might actually not follow suit down right away, because the only way it follows suit down is if the guys that have stuff priced too high start to lower the price. Keep in mind that those guys that have stuff priced too high are the same guys that were paying 105% of MMR for a car in January when we decided not to do that. So I'm kind of looking at it right now as we're watching it very, very closely. My cousin's on this stuff every single minute of every day. If that MMR drops again, of course, us and every other dealer that has a used car that's 60 days old is going to have some potential liability there, because retail is going to start to come down. But the fact that wholesale is going, I almost feel like what we normally see happen in January is actually happening right now. And if it is, we're going to be in a really good spot because we can go buy everything.
The Top 100 Used package dives into all the core practices used by those selling the most used vehicles and finding the most profit. Dealers who depend on used vehicle sales increasingly know how important their reputation is to their business. For more information on how used vehicle dealers develop a good reputation in the market, look to autonews.com. This year's package also takes a look at the used vehicle market as a whole. We examine how the affordability crisis and other factors are impacting demand, and how dealers are adapting. And we investigated the strategies helping these top dealers succeed. This year's package offers a unique peek into the realities of dealers rising to the top of the used vehicle market. We break down what challenges used dealers are facing and how they're adapting, and what strategies are helping them profit the most from their sales. For the full rankings, deeper analysis, and additional reporting, visit autonews.com.
That's Daily Drive for today. I'm Jake Neer, in for Kellen Walker. Thanks to automotive news journalists Urvaksh Karkaria, Michael Martinez, John Irwin, and David Phillips for their reporting for today's podcast. You can get the latest news on used car sales, product strategy, and everything happening in the auto industry at autonews.com. Come back over the weekend for our Weekend Drive edition of the show. Our panel of automotive news journalists will talk about the week's biggest news stories, including Ford's decision to bring back employee pricing for the July 4th holiday.
They claim it's all about celebrating America. I think probably there's more to the story.
We'd love to hear from you. Let us know what you think of the show and the topics we covered today. Send us an email at dailydrive@autonews.com and leave us a voicemail at 313-444-2774. And if you enjoy the podcast, remember to like, leave a review, and subscribe so you never miss an episode.